Hello and welcome. This tutorial will walk you through how to use Adobe Illustrator in order to create 8-bit art. So this tutorial is specifically for FIRST Robotics teams, and the dimensions I'll be using is very particular to that. However, anyone wanting to learn how to make 8-bit art should find this useful, even if you've never opened Illustrator before. So to go ahead and get started, we're going to create a new document either from here or File New. And when you have this screen, you'll see lots of items here. But as you can see, these are my recent items because I use Illustrator a lot. If you don't have these, then you can always go to Art and Illustration, and then we're going to specify our own dimensions. So we're going to change the unit to pixels, and we're going to change this to 40 pixels wide by 40 pixels high. And then that is it, and then go ahead and create that. So on our screen, we have this white workspace, which is called the artboard. On this side, we have a panel full of tools, and on this side, we have our workspaces. I won't go too much into detail on the specific pieces because there's a lot of information, but the basic things you'll want to be aware of. If you don't know what something is in Illustrator, for the most part, you can hover over it and the name will pop up. So you don't have to memorize every single tool. If there's a white arrow underneath it, let's use this for example. If there's a white arrow in that corner, that means that there are other tools nestled underneath it. So with this, if we take the rectangle tool for example, in order to access the rest of those tools, we click and hold, and then you see the rest of the tools pop up underneath there. Oops, get rid of that. On this side with our workspaces, it basically is a preset grouping of windows that you might find useful. So we're going to use the painting workspace. If you don't have it pulled up already, you can switch through them by clicking here and then identify the workspace you'd like to use. If for any reason you don't see these windows pop up, we're specifically going to use swatches today. You can always go to Window at the top and then scroll down until you find the desired window. So in case you can't find it. The same can be said for the tools. If for any reason the tool panel over here doesn't show, you can access it by going to Tools and then it's the default panel. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's begin. In the spirit of 8-bit art, we want to create a grid, and then we're going to use that grid to fill in the spaces in order to create our 8-bit design. So in order to do that, we'll first go to the rectangle grid tool, which is nestled underneath the line segment. So we'll click and hold, and rectangular grid tool. In Illustrator, there are two ways you can create shapes. You can either click and drag the shape, or you can just click in the artboard and then designate which options you'd like to use. So we're going to click in the middle of the artboard so that the options panel shows, and we're going to make this grid 40 by 40 because that's how large our artboard is. And then for our dividers, we're going to do 39 and 39 so we can get a perfect grid. And we want the outside rectangle checked, and then OK. So now we have our grid. Right now it looks black, but that's because we're working with a really small space and our stroke is 1 point. And so we need to make that smaller. And the stroke, by the way, is the width of a line. So we're going to change this number to something small like 0.05. Hit enter, and now we can actually see the grid. So the selection tool allows us to click objects as a whole, and the direct selection tool allows us to isolate points. So for the most part today, we will be working with the selection tool if ever we want to grab something. So with the selection tool, we're going to click and drag this grid so that it lines up perfectly with our artboard, and it kind of snaps into place when something's perfectly aligned. So show that to you again. You'll see the purple lines show, and it's hard, I think it's a little hard to tell when you're looking at it, but when you're actually manipulating the grid on your own, you'll notice it snap into place a little bit. Okay, great. So now we're going to, so now that we have our grid created, we have to make it so that we can paint with it. So we're going to create what's called a live paint group. So with our grid selected, and we know it's selected because it's blue, so with our grid selected, we're going to go to the live paint bucket tool, which is under the shape builder. So the shape builder is right here. So we're going to click and hold, and then select the live paint bucket. And then we will click the group to make a live paint group, and then we will deselect it, and now we can start painting. So a few tips. While we're painting, it's important that we have the live paint bucket tool selected. So if I had, say, the selection tool selected and I choose a color, then nothing happens with the grid. So if I go to the live paint bucket tool, then I can click it and I can now paint inside each individual space. So to create our team's avatar, we'll select colors from the swatches panel and then either click one by one or click and drag in order to start designing our avatar. So in Illustrator, a lot of our common command functions or control functions work. So I can for example, I can do Command Z or Control Z to undo something, just like I would in, say, a Word document. So let's go ahead and start designing. Oh, also, you are able to choose colors from here as well. The reason why I recommend using the swatches panel is because they already have some preset colors, so it makes it a little bit easier. So since our team color is blue, I'm going to go with blue and just start drawing my avatar. Now, as you do this, you want to take up as much space as possible. Like I mentioned before, we're working on a very small scale, even though it doesn't seem that way. One way that we can check this is by zooming out. So in this bottom corner, you see where it says 1607. If I double click that and type 100, then it'll show me the actual image as it will appear when we're done. So it's a very, very tiny image, so we want to be careful about not going too far into detail. You can also go to view and zoom in or zoom out as well to accomplish the same thing. So I'm going to zoom back in and keep designing. So as I'm going along, if I make a mistake and I want to get rid of a color, so say I want to get rid of these two pieces sticking out here, this square here with the red line through it, it means no color, no fill color. So if I click that and click and drag over those two, they disappear. Now, you may be asking, well, can't I just use white? Well, if I do that, let's say I do white right there, it looks like it's gone, but that white artboard background isn't really white, it's really transparent. So you can always check your work by going to the selection tool, selecting the grid, and dragging it off screen, off to the side, and then you can see what the image truly looks like. So there's a difference between a white background and a transparent background, and it only really matters if you want to do a transparent background. But my advice is if you want something to appear white, unless it's the background, you should actually fill it in with the color white. So while you're designing, we want to keep, that's why I have to go to the paint bucket. While you're designing, you want to keep the spirit of 8-bit in mind. 8-bit is designed to be simple. Simple colors, simple design. So don't overwhelm yourself by trying to make something super complicated because it doesn't need to be. Also, it'll be very small anyway. So this is one of those times where the simpler the better. So give myself a good base here. clicking and dragging the same color. And then if I want to switch colors, maybe I want to do this bright blue, make, I don't know, set of eyes, I can do that. Another thing to consider, if you are struggling with creating 8-bit, let's see, if you're struggling to create a design, then you can always take a step. There are a few things you can do. You can either look for inspiration from the web, look at other people's 8-bit art, get some inspiration for your own, get some ideas. You can look at video games, and then you always have the option of taking a step back from the computer, getting some graph paper and colored pencils, and draw it that way. That's a good way sometimes to not worry about the technology to not worry about learning technology while you're also trying to design an avatar. So it's a very valid way to go too. All right, let's see. Click Simple Avatar is almost finished. What else? Yeah, and then you can, because it's a grid, you can also rely on the squares so you can count them, and there's a lot more that you could do with it that I'm just not doing for the sake of time and for the sake of demonstration, but have fun with it. Okay, so let's say that that's my team's avatar. Actually, I should also do, oops, actually, yeah, we'll do that. So right now, you'll notice I did not do any background. I did not do anything on the background, which is fine. You can do a colored background, but you also don't have to, and you'll see why later. So let's see, so I'm going to do this. Let's make that a little bit longer. And remember, you have a lot of flexibility in what you do here, so it's very forgiving. So don't be afraid to try something out. And every time I'm deleting, by the way, I'm just doing Control Z because it's a quick shortcut. Okay, so that looks good. So I filled up most of the space. I could probably go a little bit further out, but I filled up most of the space, and then I'm going to preview it by going back to 100%. And as you see, you can't see anything. That's because the grid is selected, so I'm just going to select that tool and click outside to deselect. So that's what my avatar is going to look like, and I feel good about that. So now that we are done drawing our avatar, we have to do a few formatting changes in order to save it. So with the selection tool, I'm going to click the grid to select everything, right click, and go to ungroup. So that undoes the live paint group that we made earlier. Now, without deselecting, I'm going to go to Objects, Live Paint, and Expand. And this changes the live paint into objects. And again, with it still selected, we're going to go to Window, Pathfinder, and then this Pathfinder box will appear. And then we're going to find the one that says Divide. And remember, you don't have to remember what it looks like. Just hover over it and it'll show you the name. And then we're going to click that. So this now separates the grid from the spaces. So now I'm going to deselect everything, and I'm going to find the Magic Wand tool, which is right here, Magic Wand. And then I'm going to use the Magic Wand tool to select the grid, and then press Delete to get rid of that grid. So now we have just the avatar. I'm going to move that to the side. So now I have just my avatar, which is exactly what I want. All that's left is for me to save it. So I'm going to go to File, Export, Export As, and I'm going to change it to say team avatar. So when you save it, you want to make sure it's a PNG. There are several different file formats, but for first we need to make it a PNG. And the reason why is that PNG allows for you to save as transparent backgrounds as well. Also, that's what first specifies, so we'll go with that. And then you want to click Use Artboards, and then Export. And then this option screen will come up. The resolution should be 72 ppi. And those transparent backgrounds I was telling you about earlier, you can decide your background color. So it can either be white, transparent, or black. And if you select something, it'll show you a preview in this little screen down here. So that's what it will look like with black background, transparent background, these gray squared, this gray and white checker, it means that it will be transparent. And then we have a white background. So for this one, I'm going to use a white background. And then OK. And now we are all done with our avatar. Before we finish, we also want to save this as an Illustrator file. So when we save something as a PNG, we can no longer edit it here in Illustrator. So we also want to save a copy in Illustrator so we can always go back and make changes. So we'll go to File, Save As, and I'll also call this Team Avatar. And then it says Adobe Illustrator, and then Save. And then all of the presets here are fine, so we're going to click OK. And that's it. We now have our team avatar. So if I minimize this and go to my desktop, you can see my team's avatar right here. And that's what it looks like. So thank you so much for joining me on this tutorial. I hope it's been helpful. And if there is anything else that I could help you with Illustrator, I'm more than willing to walk you through that as well. So just let me know. Thank you. Have a great day.